because I almost started crying about a couple minutes ago because I realized someday you're not going to be here. I'm not going to be here. That this will be here.
It's a generational problem. I have more work to do, and I will do the work. And I'm going to repair all the damage that's been done that I can do on my watch. And I will do my duty. And that's why I teach the way I do. That's where the passion, that's where the rage to master comes from, because that clock's ticking. Nothing's given to me. I don't know what's going to happen in the next minute. And this has been the most scary thing I've ever done. Nothing even close. Jumping out of planes and fighting, and that even compares. But just talking about this and recording it, now I've learned to be vulnerable, which I never learned in my life. I'm 58, and I'm finally doing it. I'll let you see who I am.
Brian Hill has been a coach and instructor for over 3 decades, and he's the co-founder, along with his wife Shelly, of The Complete Combatant in Georgia. Brian is a highly sought after coach for good reason. He has a way of helping people through his instruction in a much deeper way than just building skills. He teaches in a way that is very unique and makes you face your own fears and learn things about yourself that you never realized. Before he was a coach, he was an MMA fighter. And as we'll learn tonight, he has been a fighter his entire life in more ways than just on the mat. His experience and struggles in his own life have fed his lifelong mission as a coach. And for the first time ever, Brian is going to share his story with the world. I cannot tell you how unbelievably honored I am that he's going to do this, and that he trusts me to facilitate this process. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where it's going to go. And honestly, we're both a little bit nervous. So we're just going to be brave and walk through this together, and don't have any expectations other than we hope that it will help someone out there by hearing this story. So let me bring Brian Hill onto the show. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Laura.
Whew. And we haven't even got started yet. And look at me. So
it's good. It's genuine.
What do you hope to accomplish today, and why did you agree to do this?
Several things are important in this. Number one is you. I don't think I'd do this with much of anybody else, nor do I think I'd do it again. I think this is a one-time done for me. But you and I have a deep trust with each other, and we've done some hard work together. So I feel like I can do this with you. I spoke to somebody who's offered a lot of counseling for me in my life, and she wrote a book about this. And she suggested that if I felt like I could do it, that it may reach one person and change their life as nothing else has before. And that's what she's found. So that's the reason I really want to do it. And then I often look unhuman from the outside when people watch me train. Mm-hmm. And when I talk about things, I look like this very professional, almost my wife says, I'm some sort of robot. But I want you to really know what's going on inside. I think a lot of you will be able to relate to the chaos and turmoil that it is to be a human being. But I want this to also to be a great story of challenge and redemption and transformation.
Well, and I remember when I first got to know you, Brian, that I was dumbfounded when you told me that you on the inside were full of chaos and passion, because I thought you had it so together, and it turns out you're really good at making other people more important than yourself. And it seems like that's kind of been your mission as you've gone through this.
It has. There's several choices with people with tough backgrounds. We can become a perpetrator. We can become a protector. It's really the only choices we have. And I had to find a niche where I could have some importance. make a difference, and not only leave the world as it is, but hopefully a bit better place. So that's what I've always worked towards. And I think it's a need. I don't think I have much choice in it. I have always felt this way, and teaching is what gives me the greatest satisfaction in my life.
So one last thing before we officially start. Why now?
I was thinking about this morning. It's interesting. This is the halfway journey for me. About 23 years, 24 years of really a tough go. And now I've had 24 years to climb out of it. And I think this is the time where I can be vulnerable. I've been teaching deliberate coaching, which has opened me up in a way that I was very unexpected, frankly, a bit frightening, very fatiguing, because I started teaching who I am. And that's been a very changing thing. And then I keep things that I admire, that I read, the philosophers, they say, be vulnerable, be yourself. And that's not usually how men are. Frankly, not any of us are truly vulnerable. So I feel like I'm healthy enough, and then I'm willing to do this. Hopefully I'll set a good example by doing so. I do not look for sympathy in this. Your compassion is more than welcome. But what I want you to know is that maybe the struggles you're going through are similar.
I said one last thing, but I have one last thing. What are the voices in your head? What are you most afraid of, or what are you choosing not to buy into, but are struggling with even right now, just as we're getting into this?
When I say being vulnerable, I'm a hypervigilant personality because of my background. I am scared of how my enemies will use this against me. And the conclusion is that my enemies have been using it against me my whole life. Now, I'm not saying there's a whole bunch of enemies out there, but there are people who don't wish me well, as there are for everyone. I think we're often defined by the people who don't wish us well. And by living in fear and allowing that to control me, I can't be the best version of myself. And that's the fear that I see. I've also expressed this before. The feeling for young children in this situation is that nobody cares. It doesn't matter. Frankly, I'm shocked to sit here and tell my story, because there's a part of me that just thinks maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe nobody wants to hear it. Maybe it's too much. And those are fears. But I'm not fear. I am something else. I am Brian Hill. I am my interior compass that I have built through character and discipline and affirmation. And I will relish the fear. I will follow through, and I will do the best job I can. And Lord knows I'll probably make some mistakes along the way with this, but I'm going to try something new. And hopefully the last third of my life, I can live in a less fearful state, be my more genuine self, and maybe help more people that way.
I think that the exercise of you going through this is one of the most remarkable things people could watch. Really leading by example is what you're doing right now. So I can't commend you enough for that, because that's really hard to do. So where do we begin with all this?
Well, the thing I want everybody to remember is that we have a culture where we're talking about people who have been victimized. And I certainly have been in my past life, but I learned to survive it. And then I learned to become, as I turn it, a warrior. And that doesn't mean I fight war. It means that I face challenges wholeheartedly. And the challenge for me began from the moment of conception, obviously. In this story, you'll hear it. It was a difficult path. And I think all of us have this. There's certain portions of this that we can relate to. So I think that's where we start. We move forward from the beginning. I'm going to say things about my parents, and they're both deceased, that aren't flattering, but also I know that they were doing the best they could. And we'll talk about how these things are cyclic and generational, and how they're passed on and they perpetrate themselves, and how it starts from a very young age as we get started on it. So I think that's the place we begin, is with their background.
Where did everything begin? Have you always lived in Georgia?
No, I was born in Florida, and I was born in a small place called Coconut Grove, and I spent most of my time in Miami until I was about, I guess, 12 or 13, and then we moved to Georgia. So I was a young child in a very international city who was often the only Caucasian kid around where I lived. It had changed very much then. So I have a very different idea of what it was like to be young and in that position.
Were you an only
So
child?
yeah, so that's here we go with the story.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
my poor parents, they had children which they abandoned. Um, and I won the lottery. They kept me, but I didn't know this, and I found most of this out when I was 18. In fact, I just recently found out that in the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years that my father had a daughter because she called me out of the blue. She does the history for Sons of American Revolution and Daughters of American Revolution, and she was calling to see if I was his son, and then I found out I had a half sister. So
Wow.
yeah, it's really crazy. I did ancestry.com, which probably was not a great idea for me. Um, I found out that both my parents were married before me, and they suddenly got divorced, and I was created miraculously 6 months later. So
Wow.
probably it came out of infidelity, and then they both had left children, not because of that. My mom had some mental health problems, and she abandoned both of her children. My dad abandoned his daughter, so it was not probably the best start. And as a young child, I can never understand why they disliked each other so much and why there's so much hatred in there.
Yeah.
As an adult, maybe I can understand a little bit more how tough it was, you know. And they both came out of very hard households. You know, my dad was born in 1918,
Wow.
and he had it rough. You know, from what I heard, he didn't speak about it much, but he had it very tough. And in my grandfather, my mom's father, died when she was very young, and she was put in the and you can only imagine in rural Georgia, she was put in an orphanage. Uh,
Mm.
Mom was pretty abusive, so this is where the generation starts, and I imagine it was before that. You know, Shelley and I do a lot of work with survivors of domestic and sexual abuse, and it's a generational thing. You know, people want to
Hmm.
make laws and they want to say do this and do that, but it's passed on from generation to generation to generation. So not only does it damage the victim, but if the victim has a child, it damages that child. And so that's kind of where it starts with them.
So why do you think then that you were kept, so to speak, that you weren't abandoned if they abandoned everyone else?
Maybe because they're older. I don't really know. They came to some sort of commitment to make each other miserable. You know,
Really?
my dad took good care of my mom, but he was not a good person, and he was very angry. My mom had what's likely a borderline personality disorder. She was a narcissist, and she was very flirtatious with men in front of him and around him, and so they were always in this war. And later, I noticed that when my dad had passed, my mom was at a loss. So maybe they'd been old enough. She was well pleased with me as a son. That really defined who she was. I was a good son because she was a good mother. And that's the narcissism and the personality. And then my dad could keep her because, you know, he had a child. I don't really know, but that's my feeling in the household. It was it was not a happy place. I can't remember a lot of easy times. So I became a very hyper vigilant person. I have memories of being 3 and a half, and really starting to pay attention because it was dangerous all the time. Not because they were going to kill me or they're going to kill each other, but it was just a dangerous place. It was an abusive, emotional place that had a lot of things going on. So I
So
think that's why they stuck.
what if you could call it a relationship? What kind of a relationship did you have with both your mom and your dad? What did that look like on a day-to-day basis?
Um, my mom was.
Like,
It's
were
it's
they
very
there?
hard.
Were they not
Yeah,
there? You know?
my mom stayed at home. My dad was very successful then,
Oh, okay.
and he had a job where he had met her, and he was very successful, and she was able to stay at home, and she did interior decorating and refurbished houses that we lived in and sold them. So they had a pretty good thing going there. My dad. Uh, he wasn't very good with children. He didn't really like children. There's just no doubt about that. He had a genius level IQ, and he found it very difficult to relate to a child. So I was really a little man from the beginning on. My mom
Yeah.
treated me like an object of her affection, and if I was good,
Oh,
therefore she was great. So it
yeah.
was kind of odd. Now they're sometimes very kind. It's not all bad. It's just a very different dynamic, and it's hard to relate to that for most people.
Yeah, because I'm trying to wrap my head around. I'm trying to put myself in your household, right? And think
Mhm.
about what your day to day, like what are the conversations? Like what tell me an example of, a typical day in that household. Were you on pins and needles all the time? Were you walking on eggshells? What were your biggest concerns and fears as a child? What was going through your mind then?
I was very vigilant. I was way too young to be that vigilant. I often relate to people that I could see the house breathing. I was
Mm,
given a great deal of freedom because I was an only child, although I was not given any latitude because there was nobody to blame it on except me,
mhm.
and so I was scarce. We didn't have a TV. And I have to be careful with this. I don't want to step on anybody's religious beliefs, but my parents were a member of Christian Science. And so
Mm,
that meant it was a very religious household, and there was no medical care ever.
wow.
So to give you kind of this idea of what it was like, days would start off with reading the Bible and then Christian Science interpretation of what you're reading also as a lesson plan. None of it's too bad, but I had been outside playing, and I got really hot, and I came in and asked my mom for a glass of water, and she was busy. She didn't really pay attention, and I came back in and I saw a glass of clear fluid, and I picked it up and downed it. In that moment, I had drank Clorox bleach, and I was probably 4. So the response was nothing except to pray over me. So I had ingested something we know that's particularly harmful. I still have problems to this day with my esophagus because of it. Who knows what it did to the rest of me? As I like to say, though, I'm very clean on the inside, and they just
Oh, no.
they just prayed a lot for me and hoped it all worked out.
Wow.
You know, and that's I don't I don't want anybody's religious beliefs to be affected, but to make
Yeah.
that choice for somebody at that age who can't have anything, and it's a waiting to see if I make it, you know,
Yeah.
if God intervened or not, if the prayer worked, that's the belief system, but it was very
Wow.
difficult, you know. I had a lot of difficult lessons like that early. I was out walking my poodle, and a Doberman came and grabbed my poodle by the neck and broke its neck in front of me, And I was very, very young when this happened. So my parents' response to that was, of course, take the dog to the vet. And most people would put the dog down because it was paralyzed,
Yeah.
it was still functioning. My mom kept the dog.
What?
She kept a paralyzed dog. So this dog would drag itself by the neck down the hallway, which is just horrifying when you think about it. The suffering put on this animal, but she couldn't let it go because it loved her, you know. And I
What a
had,
selfish thing to do.
yeah, and I had no, they didn't counsel me and they didn't say, "Oh, I know you saw something horrible." They just let me be. So I became mature way before my time, and not in a good way. I had all these anger things that I was dealing with, and then I've lost a dog, and I felt fairly abandoned in those moments. It made it
Yeah.
very, very difficult. That's not all the time. There was a lot of freedom. I got to run amok. I explored. I had a lake in the back. I had boats. I swam. I took care of ducks that were ailing in the lake because they all got sick because it hadn't rained. But I had good times, but most of it's away from the house, you know.
Oh my
And
gosh, this is crazy because I can relate to
yeah,
that. Okay.
yeah.
Um, Sorry, give me a second. I can't think of the next question. Sorry.
It's okay. That's okay.
Um,
I can work through it too.
I didn't know. So one of my biggest questions that I was kind of afraid to ask you, but now it makes perfect sense, was your view on Christ, your view on the
Mhm.
Bible, your view on religion? And those, like, the word religion by itself can mean many different things to many different people, right? For some people, it's a bad word.
Yeah.
And but knowing that about you now, it makes total sense, where you come from on a lot of things. And maybe I shouldn't assume I know, but I am curious about that because I am a believer, and
Mhm.
I just wonder how that shaped you.
Uh, I read the Bible a lot. I
Yeah.
read very well. We weren't allowed to have a TV, so there was no TV in my house until I was 7 or 8. So I really think I started reading very early in my life, maybe 3 or 4. Uh, I would sit with this little book called The Little Red Airplane, and I'd heard it so many times that eventually it started making sense to me, and I felt like I could read it. I don't know how it all worked. There was some help from my parents. My dad was well educated. He was very smart. So I had a lot of Bible reading, and then the other part of Christian Science was very wordy. So maybe that's where my love of words came from.
Mm.
Uh, Reading saved my life. There's no doubt in my existence because it was able for me to put in the other place. I think my relationship uh, with Christ or with Jesus is more as a teacher. Um, as we explore this later, there's going to be a profound crisis in my life about this. But I was deeply immersed in this church. I used to stand up in front of them and we would testify to miracles and healings that had happened in our life. And I was able to do that as a young child and speak in front of people. It was a big central part of my life. I didn't know that it was unusual. It just seemed like it was the normal thing,
Yeah,
you know?
because when you're young, you don't know the difference.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
you don't
And
really
I
have a
didn't,
choice.
no, I didn't. I didn't. And I don't regret any of that. I regret the lack of medical care as we'll, as we'll work our way through.
Oh, there's
You
more?
know,
Okay.
yeah, of course, there's always more. I
I have
like
a
to break
feeling there's a
myself.
lot more.
Yeah. But, I think the scope is that, this really formed me from this time until puberty of being very alone, not doing well in school because I'm not really connected. I'm very isolated. Uh, like we didn't do birthdays and Christmas like everybody else
Mm,
did.
yeah.
So it was just a very odd segregation. I was growing up in a very tumultuous time where we were being bused to inner city schools.
Mm.
So just very difficult for all of us
It sounds very
to feel our
confusing
way.
too.
Yeah, yeah. And I was just very much alone. But I
Yeah.
had these two people that were, involved in my life, and it felt really good. And I felt connected, and then, I had regular activities, but I didn't know until I grew up that it was all very quite odd the way they were handling me at the time. And my dad had started a real campaign of grooming me towards what he wanted, and not in a good way. So there was a lot of weird stuff going on in my life, and you know, that's when your personality is set. So
Mhm.
I didn't relate to people well. I didn't have a lot of friendships. My parents could not hold a friendship with anybody. There was always some unspoken catastrophe that happened behind. We had to leave a church.
Mhm.
We couldn't talk to people anymore.
Mhm.
I don't really know what was going on. They didn't really discuss it that way, but there was always nobody else. Friendships lasted very shortly with my mother because, she always believed that people weren't good enough for her. That's the
Mhm.
narcissism. They didn't love her enough. They didn't take care of her. And she did some strange things. And then my dad was just an angry, jealous man at heart. So it really made this weird household. I think the accumulation of it was my dad eventually lost his job, um, which is an unmooring event for a man.
Mhm.
He, he'd worked for airlines. He was making extraordinarily good money, and suddenly he was unemployed. And I have to imagine his personality issues. As I say in class sometimes, he's probably an undiagnosed sociopath at heart. There was very little connection to the world except what he wanted and what he was willing to do for it. But he was well educated and he did well in management at a certain point. But when he lost his job, that unhinged the household. Now he still got he got a good retirement because he's quite a bit older, so it was enough to live on. But it made things much more difficult at that point. And then he was around all the time, which really changed my life. And I guess at 12, we moved to Georgia then because my mom's sister lived here. And she ended up becoming the breadwinner in the family. She went to work and she managed apartment communities.
Your
And
mom
so
did?
she was,
Or
yeah,
your
so
okay.
she was never home anymore. And my dad was home all the time. And
And
we're talking
angry
about,
probably.
yeah. Well, a man who has lost his position. He couldn't find another job. He gave up. So then he became this very stern disciplinarian around the house. To this day, I still tend to count things because I was allotted a certain amount of tissue paper, and like breakfast, it was measured and poured. He was in the military, so he was very.
Oh,
It's not OCD, but very controlling about everything. I tend to eat the same things every day because that's what I did. I've never had sugar cereal in my life, ever.
wow.
I'm probably not missing anything, but those are the type things that happened, and it I don't think that was particularly bad, but I was surrounded by old people in Florida because there were no
Yeah.
kids in the neighborhood,
Mhm.
so I learned how to play dominoes and I watched Lawrence Welk and play chess, and it was very odd. And then we
Yeah.
moved to Georgia. There were kids around, and I was not well suited to deal with children,
Yeah.
and I had a lot of problems in that way.
So, was there ever any true connection? Did you ever, like as a kid, did you ever feel any true connection with your parent? Like as far as just general care, understanding, and love, or was that a disconnect? I'm just curious what that was like.
I desperately clung to them because they were what I had, and it was the
Okay.
only chaos I understood. My
Okay.
mom tried as hard as she could to care for me, but I don't think she was capable in the way that most people would say that is. She was kind to me, but I was a reflection of her perfection, and when I wasn't, I wasn't hers anymore. And I don't think there was a lot of that. But I will say that one of the reasons I'm sitting here is in my life, there have been good men that showed me the way, that just appeared in my life. We moved to Georgia. There was a guy called Mr. Kelly, and he was a World War II veteran. He taught me to play chess. He taught me to think. He helped me to understand what it meant to be a man. When I was very young, there was a religious teacher, Howard Elkins, who was extraordinarily kind to me. I think he knew what was going on. I think he knew where I was at, and he reached out and took care of me. So during my life, I had some good men show up and
Mhm.
teach me the opposite of this. I read a lot of Marvel comic books, which are
Mhm.
just Greek tragedies. So I started trying to emulate that. I
Yeah.
really wanted to be Captain America. I think I turned out to be more of Batman, but that's okay. You know, a little darker. But there were times, and they tried. They weren't all bad, and that's what makes it even harder.
Yeah.
I was always trying to please. I was
Mhm.
always trying to make them acceptable with me. But because the things that were going on in my life, I didn't do very well in school. I didn't connect with other people very well, and I tended to act out and have trouble quite a bit.
Mhm.
So
It sounds like too that when something happened, you might have been the default that got blamed for it, and probably the one that it was taken out on most of the time, even if I can only imagine because I don't know your dad or knew your dad or whatever. I'm just trying to it's really a character in my mind at this point because I didn't know him, but I can only imagine that whatever suffering was going on in his own life or whatever disappointments in himself that he had, I imagine projected that onto you. Am I right in thinking that?
yeah, he was less than pleased with me always, and unfortunately, this is going to take a very dark turn. His baser instincts began to act out against me. And that was the big part of this, And then, like, I had to set my own broken arm. I broke
Oh
both
my
bones, and
god.
so I set it myself because there was no medical help. Apparently I did an okay job.
How old were
Um,
you?
I guess I was 12 or 13 when that happened. And I was so ashamed that I'd hurt myself. I hid it for a while. The lack of compassion to allow somebody to suffer in this way. I ruptured my eardrum on swim team. So I had a blown out eardrum that I just had to suffer through, which is excruciating, painful.
Can't imagine.
I ate a silica pack by accident, and it screwed up my liver. And so I had to work through that. And it was, we're about to get to the really hard part of the story. So I think we all have to get ready. I had fallen incredibly sick. I was feverish and I was hallucinating. And my parents would sit in the room and read the Bible to me. And I found that at least there was some connection. You know, they would read aloud to me, and, no painkillers, no aspirin, nothing. Just get through this and pray. And the way Christian Science works is you're supposed to align yourself with God. And if you do that, then you'll be healed. And so if I didn't do that, it was always on me, that I was failing constantly. And they sat with me. I was deathly ill. I don't know how any parents could do this. I was deathly ill, and they both read. And my mom had gone to bed, and my dad stayed with me. And this is, I've never admitted this before, but my dad molested me in that time. And I'm not going to get into the details, but he did molest me. And there is no little rape. We talk about this in society. There is no little violation. And it's worse, if it's somebody you don't know, but the likelihood is it's somebody you do know. And it's even worse when it's your relationship. And it's worse when it's a parent, but it's even worse when it crosses gender lines. This was a devastating event that he had been preparing me for my whole life.
No way.
I could see the grooming in this pattern of him getting ready to do this. And this hit me at puberty. So it really, it screwed me up, to say the least. And I had lost somebody who I trusted, had now betrayed me in such a way that there was no going back. And so now I was really lost, but I had to live with that person. And that's incredibly difficult. It was very lonely. There was nobody to talk to. And my life basically went off the rails at that point. I had problems before that, but it was very, very difficult to function. And the usual things that happens to somebody who's victimized by a parent started happening to me. Grades were falling, getting in trouble, like setting fires, acting out, drug and alcohol abuse. All those things started to enter my life very early. I think I had my first drink when I was 14. Both family sides have alcoholics in it. So that's really a bad mix, because that means I can process alcohol extremely well. That gene has been passed. I should have never drank. But I had no way to numb the pain, and I was utterly lost. And this goes back to your comment about religion, because I prayed so hard for help. I prayed and I prayed, and there was none. And I suffered, and I suffered in a way that by myself. And I became a problem to society because I didn't fit in school. I didn't fit in with friends. I didn't fit in anywhere. And all people tried to do was minimize me or punish me to try to get me back, because we didn't think about it. This is 1978, 79, something like that. Teachers don't know, nor do teachers really want to know that. And they had to give me an IQ test because they thought I had some sort of learning disability. And I did well on that. I'm not extremely gifted like my father was, but I have a pretty good intellect. So I ended up in talented and gifted, which meant I was unstructured, which was the problem. My life was utterly unstructured. My mom had abandoned me to this predator, and she worked constantly. She never came home because she couldn't handle him. And
she just left you there with him.
Yep.
Did she know what happened?
Well, later in my life, it came to me that the right thing to do was to go to my mother. And the shame in this is so hard. I feel it now. I feel my face flushing, and I feel the tears behind it. But I have grown into the man that could be a father to this child. So we'll work through this. I went to her and I said, Mom, Dad did this to me. And she said, Yeah, that's just how your father is. And that was the end of it. And unfortunately, that was the fracturing of the final relationship I had in life with somebody that I could connect with. And I knew that she was no longer there for me. I was appalled and I was horrified, but she was also a victim and she just couldn't deal with it. And so she knew and she disassociated and she moved on.
And then it's
And
just never talked about again, is it?
that's
It's
right.
like swept under the rug and gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think whether it's violence or sexual abuse or all that, that's what we see that's so damaging to people. And, if you've been victimized by it, you're not really prone to want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
The shame is that somehow maybe you did something. You deserve this. You should suffer like this. If you had just been a better daughter or son, it wouldn't have happened. And I dealt with that shame and that guilt, and it affected the next 15 years of my life. It still affects my life, to be quite honest. I will give you a note of hope, though. I don't think I would change my life. There are probably easier paths, but I am very happy with who I am now. So, from here on out, it's tough, but it gets better. It gets better. But that's a hard thing to admit, and it's a harder thing to live with. But I hope that those of you that have suffered can relate to that. There's a feeling of comparing suffering, but that's not it. Children should be protected. Children should be cherished. Children are your future. We are just ghosts of their past. We are here to propel them into the future. And one of the guiding principles of my life has been protection of children since this. It's important, and no child deserves this. And I know parents have their own failings, but if it happened to you, it's not your fault.
Whew.
Yeah. Yeah.
We might need an intermission, Brian Hill. I know it probably just barely got started, but.
Well, we're doing fine.
Do you know what I felt in that moment when you were telling that story? I got so angry. So angry because I somehow, in a weird way, I felt like I knew you as that kid, like I could picture that kid, and I just wanted to intervene,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody knew what to do. I don't think people know what to do now. It's very difficult. And, I don't know if there's a good path. I've had to deal with the state trying to intervene in this, and that's just as abusive in some ways. What we have to do is generationally, we have to help the children that are available. We have to quit blaming them, and we have to save the next generation from them and help them become whole so they can become survivors and warriors after that. And that's really my life's mission, is to help people reconstitute themselves, to become to have the integrity to recognize the whole of their character. Because listen, guys, what I'm saying is not heroic. I froze. I couldn't do anything about these things. I acted out. I got in trouble. I was not a good person part of my life, but I was a person. I was just a human being, and I do the best I can, and I recovered the best I can. And it happened because there are people like you that care enough to reach out. They get angry about it. I have told people this story, not many, but the reactions have been appalling. People can't deal with it. It's not something they can deal with easy.
What do you mean appalling?
They just either shut off or they blame me, and they say, well, how bad could it, I hear this a lot. Well, how bad could it be? And that's a tough one. Do I have to quantify how bad my life was in order for it to matter? Wow. And so how good was your life? It's not a quantification. It was a poor child, and that poor boy was alone, and he had no idea what to do, and he suffered, and something incomprehensible happened, and I don't need sympathy for it. But compassion is good. Reach out a hand, help people up, let them know that you accept them. Don't cut them from the group. The shaming of the victim is very prevalent. Cut them away, push them away, because we don't want to deal with these truths that, sometimes families don't work very well, and sometimes they're super dysfunctional, Yep.
Dude.
Yep.
Yeah, and what's crazy about that, and I can only on a small level relate, but like I don't want to compare anything of mine to yours, and it's not about me, but I do believe that the dysfunction in families many times becomes so normalized. It's so normalized that it's hard to break free from. And it's really hard for people to separate themselves from whatever this dysfunctional unit is in order to see a perspective that's different. Than it's like being in the weeds, can't see the forest for the trees kind of a thing. And it's rare for someone to break away from that and do differently, if that makes sense. It's easier to stay, even though it's horrific. It's easier to stay in what's familiar, even if it's horrible, right? And that's what I see so many people do. They wish for better, but they don't actually believe that anything better is available to them. And so they just stay and they repeat, even without meaning to. It's like they just don't know how else to operate.
That's the truth. It's like I have dealt with chaotic individuals my whole life because I'm comfortable with it. It's easier for me. My in-laws are so normal. They may be very uncomfortable. They were so good and wholesome.
Yeah.
It's like holding up a mirror to everything I don't have, that I don't understand. And I think that that's what leads us to the next part is, how do you save yourself? And I will say it again, that reading saved my life because it allows you to occupy another person's perspective. Whether I'm truly empathetic, I'm a very good judge of people and their motivations because I watched two parents my entire life, and I became a silent stalker of prediction of behavior, which is a part of where my teaching prowess comes from. I can look deeply inside of people. And I looked and, I had this introspective vision because I'd read so much and I'd occupied these vast adventures in the hero's journey. And I knew I had to leave home, and I knew I had to be uncomfortable, and I knew I had to go into that dark cave and face that dragon, because there's not one journey that's not like that. Whether you're Jesus or a Knights of the Round Table or Batman, there's always this thing that you have to go fear, that you have to do the right thing. And I knew at my heart I was a moralist and not an ethicist because society had failed me on all counts. There was no help from society or others or relationships. So I had to find my own moral compass. And I could feel that I had two really different choices as they laid out in front of me. I could become something that would make the world better, or I could become something that would make the world a worse place. And I'm going to speak of evil for a second because most people don't truly understand what evil is really like. It is not this malignant thing that comes against you. It is callousness. It is the lack of caring. It is the lack of compassion. And it is doing what serves you best above all else. And there's a hole inside of broken people. And we can't fill that hole. So what we do is try to make one in you so you can relate to us. And that's where the evil truly comes from human beings. If you have a great fondness of the past, you haven't read history. Human beings have not really changed, and we're all in this moral dilemma, this struggle to be the thing that causes more pain or who builds better human beings in the future. And so, my choice was to move forward. And I had started a part-time job. I made $2 an hour. I was 14, got me out of the house. Or 13, I was working a lot, making money, and that's not a lot of money, but I decided I needed martial arts because I'd watched Kung Fu, and I didn't know what a mess David Carradine was. So, but at the time, David Carradine and Master Po seemed like they had it together. Like they were wise, they were compassionate, and they could kick ass.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I need something to protect me, but I need structure. I didn't have it at home. Nobody cared about my grades. Nobody was going to take me to athletic practice. Nothing. There was
But you didn't look
nothing.
at it as structure. Did you just gravitate towards it naturally because you were in so much chaos or
Well, I did look at it as really a structured way because I needed
really?
something. Like I can understand physical pain. I can understand clarity. People who don't fight don't understand this, but most fighters, first responders have a lot of similar stories like I do because it's so easy. It's a clear goal. I fight the other person. I suffer if I do poorly. I have elation if I do well. It's a clarity of purpose. And then watching the show, I was like, he's always so wise. He has all these troubles, but he's wise. And I'd read some philosophy and it really spoke to me. So I decided I had to go get martial arts lessons. And I ended up meeting an instructor when I was working another part-time job at Kmart. There's a blast from the past. And he was a martial arts instructor. And I asked for lessons, and he assumed I was 18 or above because I had a full-time job. And, I looked older than I was. And he said, well, I'll teach you for $15 an hour. I made $2 an hour. So after taxes, it took me 10 hours to earn one lesson. So I would go 2 or 3 times a week, and I'd spend $45 or $60 a week. So it was $240. So those of you who complain about the price of martial arts lesson, I was probably spending $1,000 a month. But if I didn't do it, I wasn't going to make it. I didn't have anything else. And I had to find this place. And unfortunately, I chose poorly because people like myself that have gone through these things, like it's recognizable to me when somebody else has been victimized. I can see it in them. And predators can see it too. And William Maple used to call it the resting victim face. It still exists in you there. So my first martial arts instructor, he tried to do well. You got to remember, this is 1980. We're more like Master Ken than UFC fighters. He had some drug and substance abuse issues and some problems with his wife. And so he beat me up a lot. Broke my nose several times, broke my ribs, really beat me. And it wasn't a class. I was getting private lessons. So I took pretty good beatings for that. And eventually I had to quit. I just couldn't go anymore. I got too scared. But we don't get much snow in Georgia, but I walked nearly 6 miles to go to practice. That's how dedicated I was to doing this, to pay this money. It only happened a couple times, but I had to walk down a large superhighway here in order to get to his place. And he was shocked that I showed up. So I was this great connection, but I couldn't go to another martial arts school because I wasn't old enough yet. Nobody would allow me to sign a contract. And I tried to lure my parents into signing me up, but they wouldn't do it. They just, I played some sports, but it was all on me. When it was in high school, I had to go out by myself. The worst is I ran track and then they made me walk home. So you can imagine running track and then you got to walk home 3 or 4 miles. My mom had the only car. Work was the most important thing in her world. And that was it. Oddly, my dad would take me to swim practice, but in retrospect, I know why he was doing that. It falls with the predation. So he was there to watch. So that takes that wonderfulness. It takes all these memories and just charms them right into the trash can, unfortunately. But I tried to be a good athlete. I couldn't. If I graduated from high school, it would have been in the electives of physical fitness and wood shop. I worked in shop a lot, and I went to class. I had a really good coach named Coach Waits, and he taught me how to exercise. I was kind of a chunky kid before this. And he taught me how to run and how to jump rope, and he wouldn't give up on me. He was a hard man, and that's what I needed. He stayed with me. He got me to exercise, and he taught me to love it. So I had a new outlet. So I'm doing martial arts, getting in great shape. I'm starting to assert myself into the world. I'm starting to not be that victim because I always wanted to disappear, and now I'm doing it. But I didn't relate to people very well, so I decided, well, if I can get a job teaching martial arts, maybe that's the right thing to do. Maybe I can connect to people because being introverted and kind of messed up, that gave me a reason to talk to people.
That's so funny
So
though that you wanted to make those changes, because I know a lot of people that go through the similar types of things you do, like getting structure into their lives and connecting with people are not things on the forefront of their mind. They're just like spinning, reeling out of control and doing whatever makes them feel good in the moment because they're so lost. And yet you're saying it's because you were reading and you saw outside perspectives that it kind of inspired you in a way.
I knew there was more, and
Yeah.
I wasn't satisfied. And I was living in so much fear. I was afraid to go to school. I was afraid to come home. I was afraid to interact with people. Everything in my life was utter, catastrophic, paralyzing fear. So I had no choice
Wow.
but to go forward. So, I learned very early with this fear I had no choice but to go. So then I started leaning into it. And as fearful as I was, it became a friend. It became a motivator. And I was like, all
Mm.
right, I can take a little bit. I can go through school today. I got in so much trouble at school. My principal knew me by my first name,
Oh, that's
and
not
he was
good.
a good man. He was a good man. He was very good to me. And he said, I'm going to have to suspend you for missing so much school. And I was definitely a bit of a smart aleck then. And I said, so let me get this right. You're going to punish me with the very thing that I desire by not being here. And he goes, it is ironic, isn't it, Brian? Now, I think they solved that one in school suspension.
That's funny.
But interesting story. Years later, when I'm teaching martial arts, he was best friends with one of my clients whose children trained with me. He walked in and he saw me teaching, and this is, I don't know how long ago, but maybe 8 years after I graduated from high school. And he looked at me and he goes, Brian Hill. That's how well he knew me.
Wow.
Teaching children. He goes, this is perfect. And he watched and he sat down and he watched me teach children. He said, actually, you're very good at this, because I knew what children needed in that time. But that moment was a great connection. That's another good man in my life that made a difference.
Yeah.
Stan Moses, he made a difference in my life. I think that's what, it's not just the reading. There were some examples of men being men instead of what my father was. And that's what I really needed. So that made a big difference.
Yeah. There are a lot of role models that you can have as a kid that aren't family members. And thank God for
Yeah.
that, right? Thank God for that. I
That's
wonder
why I
though, I don't
encourage
want to,
people to mentor. Go ahead. Sorry.
sorry, I don't want to go backwards, but I am curious if you ever got the courage to confront your dad before he died or whatever happened there.
Yep. It'll it's a very tragic end for him. And I'll get into it, but maybe now's the right time. Because of my dad, I don't know if he was truly religious or not, or it was my mother, but he agreed with the no medical policy, maybe out of fear, maybe out of belief. He did try to do better. I think he was truly guilty about his actions. As he aged, it was never quite the same. He tried very hard, but I ended up being his caretaker as he died of undiagnosed prostate cancer.
You are kidding me.
So my mother and I had to take care of him at home while I was running a business. I'm 30 years old when he's dying because he was so much significantly older than me. And it has metastasized, so, it's everywhere. And he is suffering, and he's in a hunk, just a desiccated hunk. And I had to watch him die. And he apologized several times to me. And it's funny, he doesn't, I don't hate him the way I should, I guess, because hatred's no good for us. It's like drinking poison and wishing your enemy would die.
Yeah.
I don't have that hatred for him. I see his weakness. I wish it never happened, but I understand him better. It was much harder with my mother because I was closer.
Yeah.
And then she was very, she had just taken the information and let me be. So I knew that in that moment, her preservation was better and more appropriate. I also ended up taking care of her at the end of life. So I had to take care of both parents that had betrayed me in such a way. And the reason I did it was duty, not love. I could not look myself in the mirror if I did not take care of these people. And I did my duty, and it was difficult. My mom died of Alzheimer's in nursing care.
That
So
is,
it was a slow, Yeah, and
Oof.
she had developed a real personality disorder. She was paranoid delusional narcissist. She had been spraying herself with pesticide and wrapping herself in saran wrap to get the bugs off of her. Water was flowing through the floor. It was god awful ends, and I had to take care of both of them. And I did it. And I spoke to my counselor about it, and she said, "Well, you couldn't do otherwise because you're conscientious and you're duty bound. So, in order to honor who you are, you had to do this." Now, I
Mm.
suffered through this. It was very, very difficult, but I did the right thing. I didn't do it for love, though. I did it for duty. And
Wow.
maybe now I hope they're whole. I hope that they have found forgiveness. I hope that they can be complete people because I think it was robbed from them too.
Wow. How many years did you go through this duty of taking care of your parents?
My dad's end was, probably 18 months. My mom was, Alzheimer's is god awful.
Yeah.
It's a slow and steady decline.
Yeah.
Once it was very interesting when my father died, she really went off the rails because that kind of kept her on a straight and narrow. She was fighting against him, and without anything to fight for and living by herself, her brain began to shrink. She had a lot of cats. She didn't clean the cat boxes particularly well. So there's people can get quite paranoid when they're around a lot of cat feces. There's a particular strain of bacteria that makes rodents crazy. This may have affected
Wow.
her. And then she started applying pesticides. We didn't know she had open ulcers. She hit everything. She was very tough. Like she fell and broke her hip and her arm, and she would lay there for a day before she called for help. She got up and got to the bathroom. So, there was this, she had a hard go. She had a really hard end, and I took care of her, but, it's so hard with Alzheimer's because the person you love is not there anymore. And,
Right.
it's like expecting somebody with a heart disease to run a marathon. Somebody with a brain disease can't think. They don't think well.
Well,
And,
it's just sad.
yeah, yeah, yep.
Wow. So what was the next phase for you then? Where do we go from here?
Well,
This
things
is
get better. Things get better. It's still a hard road, but when I was 18, my parents decided to move out. Not me. They decided to move out.
what?
My mom's work was more important. She had a apartment community that she could manage in Birmingham, so she moved to Birmingham, and they left me here. They did offer some financial help, so they helped with the rent a little bit. I was working for a martial arts instructor who was taking complete advantage of me. I was 18. I earned $120 a week. The rent payment was $300. So I lived in utter poverty, and I had what was my high school best friend at the time move in. And then, of course, he moved his girlfriend in, and that
Oh
was a
boy.
real nightmare in itself. But I
Yeah.
didn't really have much money, and I had a lot of work to do. I worked at the martial arts gym, 40, 50 hours a week. I had recently had my heart broken by a girl that I felt like I was in love with, but probably just infatuated. And she had betrayed me with somebody else. So I just shut down for about 5 years. All I
Really?
did was work. I just worked. I went to the martial arts school, and I worked 60 hours a week for no pay. $120. So I got about $2 an hour again. And I really didn't have any money. I couldn't go out, couldn't date, couldn't buy things, barely had enough food to eat. So I really learned to suffer in austerity. I had become the martial monk that I wanted to. I did have a little phase of being a breakdancing instructor.
No. Oh, we need a
Yes.
video.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had a commercial that was national, and then I had quite offers of teaching breakdancing because I had this martial arts instruction, so I knew how to teach people. So I made a lot of
How
money
is this
breakdancing
not
for a
part of
while.
your classes? This should be
I
part of your
know.
classes.
Yeah, the funny thing is Gabe White asked, has anybody been a breakdancer? And I raised my hand. He was like, you? Really? But I could teach. And so it doesn't matter what I teach. I could teach martial arts. I could teach dancing. And I was in the newspaper. I was on TV. I had commercials. Not a big deal, supporting roles. But I didn't have any fear when it came to doing these things. So I did them. And I made some money on that. And then, that went away. It didn't last very long. And I just went through this, 5 years of not really having money, but teaching a lot, being used by my instructor. And I started thinking I should go into the service, that it was, this wasn't going to work out. But my instructor was using me. He knew all the buttons to push. And he was like, you're going to be the world's greatest instructor, and I'm going to put you at the top, and you'll be like me, and you'll be famous. And I was in charge of his world headquarters already, because I was so involved in teaching, because it's the only thing I had. I had nothing else except running that gym. I didn't have food. I barely had a home life. I had friends that were associated with work. So I threw myself into this, just making it as best I could, because it also removed me from all the pain in my life. It allowed me to work with other people. And I was pretty good at it because I had this drive to do it. And so at some point I'm running a 300-member Taekwondo school.
And you're how old?
I'm 18, 19 years old. So I made some bad mistakes, I can tell you that. But I made some good ones. I really learned how to teach, and I got repetitions that, I often say it, but nobody understands. I have taught for so long at such a level that nobody is even close in the firearms industry as far as instruction, because I just lived this, 240 hours a month, and that's roughly 3,000 hours a year of just teaching. And I was so driven, I would get there early, and then I'd leave, and I'd train on the way home, because I had nothing else,
So what did Brian Hill look like then as an instructor? Give me an example. Like, pretend to be yourself when you were 18 as an instructor.
Well, Brian was very full of himself, in a lot of ways. I had a humility, because I had been so broken, but I also was, physically fit. I was always chasing the fight. And I was always very much a non-traditionalist, because tradition has never worked, never will for me. The tradition of the family, the tradition of religion, nothing protected me. So I'm not a big believer in tradition. Just because a bunch of other folks did it doesn't mean it's going to work. So I was always seeking a new way to get better at things. And there was a lot of fighting. My gym was very, very good. We fought a lot. We did a lot of sparring. I was very technically competent, but I had a certain charisma that people gravitated to. I always seemed older, from when I was very young, because of what I experienced. And I always put them first. But I used to have on Monday nights, training was so hard because they made me take Sunday off, and I was miserable. So Monday was always hard. It was hard training. And so I had a banner that said, "Welcome to Hell Night," which was really stupid, And I really push people hard, but this is the 80s, and we don't know better yet. And we're training very hard, and I'm going to tournaments because it's the only thing I can do. And I'm sparring with everybody, and there's a big group. There's like 11 or 12 schools. So it's a big community, and I kind of fit in,
Yeah.
So it works until I don't
that
fit
kind
in.
of probably became a new family to you, didn't it?
Yeah. But I can't take instruction well. I can take instruction, but you can't tell me what to do. It's definitely got to be my idea.
I can relate to that.
Being free was great. Teaching at that level. Since I got results, I was able to do everything. But this is something we'll hear in my story is I'm not a political animal. So the politicians usually get me in the end. They're better at creating alliances and getting their way. And I don't really think about that very much.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not very good at that. And so I often fall prey to people using me. And I think that's part of, when you're victimized like this, you fall prey to users constantly. And my instructor was using me. And I thought maybe I should go join the service. But this is the moment my life changes for the positive. I was going home and I got hit by a car on my motorcycle. I had gone to Kroger and I bought a jar of spaghetti sauce and spaghetti. And if you've ever been a poor person, you know how important that is, because you can get a lot of meals out of some noodles, some spaghetti, and it was delicious. And my cooking skills would allow that. And I put it in my jacket, and I exited the wrong way from the parking lot. So as I came down the road the other way in the thoroughfare, a woman in one of those beaver board station wagons hit me. And I was doing 55 miles an hour. She hit me right in the leg. The bike disappeared. I had a very clear thought that if I don't roll, I'm going to die. So all this martial arts training comes to play. It saves my life in that moment. I do a front roll. I roll 168 feet. I break my collarbone. I break one of my vertebrae. My ankle is shattered. Both bones and the ankle itself is shattered. The motorcycle is totaled through my leg. I broke my hand, but I rolled 168 feet. I didn't get any road rash, so that was good.
Oh my
And then I
gosh.
came to rest. I came to rest, and the first thing that happened to me is I could hear my shoe exploding because the swelling was so rapid. We had those Velcro shoes back then, and the top
Yeah.
thing broke off. And if you've ever broken your collarbone, it's god awful pain. So I knew I was really messed up. I couldn't feel my leg because it was a compression injury. I couldn't feel it. But the collarbone was awful. And the lady who hit me ran up to me and pointed at me, and she said, "This is all your fault. You came out of nowhere." And there was a good nurse there, and she said, "Get her away from him." And she took care of me, and they called an ambulance. And they put me in the back of an ambulance, and they're like, "What hospital do you want to go to?" I was like, "I can't go to the hospital. I've never been to a doctor in my entire life. I've never been to one doctor except for a physical for athletics, which is not going to the doctor." And they're like, "Son, you have to go." And I said, "I have no insurance." And they said, "That doesn't matter. We're taking you." And they took me to the hospital. Now, unfortunately, there were a couple of gunshot wounds that came in before me. So I laid in the hall with a tourniquet on my leg for a long time. And nobody was there. My parents lived in Alabama at the time. So I had somebody call my house, and my best friend's girlfriend showed up, and she nearly fainted when she saw me, and she didn't know what to do. So I laid in a hallway for 4 or 5 hours conscious with just a
Oh
broken
my
wrist.
gosh.
They had to take MRIs and roll me over the clavicle. And this is my persuasiveness. I got one of the orderlies to get me some water because I'd lost so much blood. I was really thirsty, which means when I woke up from surgery, I threw up everywhere. I didn't know if I was going to have a leg when I went to sleep. And I
And
didn't
you're
know if I
how
was going
old?
to make it. I'm 22, 23.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm going to make it. So I went from a stellar athlete, and now I'm nothing.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
went to sleep, and my parents did something really well. They fought for me in this moment, probably because they were afraid of the medical establishment, but they wouldn't let them amputate my leg. So they were supposed to take my leg off below the knee. And they found a Navy doctor, Dr. Sabrin, and he said, "I can fix it," because he was used to fixing these type of injuries. Compression injuries are really difficult, crush injuries. And an athlete never comes back from the injury I've had. There's no way to be an athlete. So it's remarkable that I can walk in the first place. But he said, "I can save it." And he did. So
Wow.
I woke up, and my leg was still there, and I was a mess, and I had no idea what I was facing. But then I was a cripple. I was in a wheelchair. Everything that I believed in and I held on to was now gone. I was not an instructor. I was not a martial artist. I was a cripple. And in that moment, I faced death. I faced it truly and well. As the Indians say, I sang my death song. I really felt like I wasn't going to make it. So from that point forward, there was a new life. It's as if I had a new chance. When I woke up, I had a new chance. And it wasn't a lot of feeling sorry for myself. I got through it. I was as useful as I could be. My friends were good enough to take me out occasionally. I spent a lot of time in a wheelchair, but I continued to teach. I went to the gym. I couldn't do it all the time. I would stand on one leg and demonstrate. I just wasn't going to accept it. And the doctor kept telling me, he said, "You're probably not going to walk." And the insurance company said, "You can get a big settlement, but you're going to be crippled for life." And this is probably a very silly thing I did, but I settled for very little money in the moment. I settled for my medical bills and about $70,000, which I could have gotten significantly more. But I was afraid that if I believed what they said, that was it for my life. I was going to be a cripple, and I wasn't going to accept that. And I was like, I fought harder fights than this so I can come back. And I began to train myself. It took 18 months to get back to normal. I have never given myself an excuse. I live in pain every day. Because bone pain like this never goes away. It is a constant companion of mine.
I did not know that.
I don't let anybody know. If you watch me on the range, you can see it. I get tired. I start to gimp a little bit. I was told I wouldn't walk, so I walked. And I was told I wouldn't run, so I ran. And I was told I'd never fight again, so I learned to fight on the other side. I have a stubbornness complex, obviously, and I fought. Now, it limited my athletic ability. I was never the athlete I was before because you can't come back from this sort of injury. This is a career ender. We've seen it in MMA where they kick somebody's shin and their ankle flips around. It's an injury that can't be come back from. So I got to fight, I still got to be a martial artist, but now I had humility. I was less, and I could relate to people better. And my
Mm.
function became coach instead of fighter. I still fought very hard, but I could connect to people. Uh, and it allowed me to be present for them. And it allowed me to be a better coach. So I still credit it as maybe one of the best things that happened to me in my life. Maybe that's me being nice about it, but it did change the direction of my life. And I think in that moment I was transformed. And I think it was, you got to be careful what you pray for, right?
Yeah.
You don't get what you want, you get the experiences you need. And apparently that's the experience I needed, but it made me a better human being, and it corrected the course of my life. Now I had some very low moments. I have to say it. I drank too much. I was suicidal at times. It was very difficult. I really had to work back over a 2-year period, getting back to where I was. But there was a dawning optimism that I never felt before. And I
Really?
think that's why the suicide was such a, it was an appealing thing, because I just wanted the pain to end. But also I felt like maybe there could be more, you know, um, and there was more, you know. So I found a way to come back, and then I no longer accepted being utterly broke. I took extra jobs. I had some money in the bank now because of the settlement. So that was great. Unfortunately, somebody identified me, and I guess he was my friend. It's hard to say, but he wanted to open a business together. So we opened a martial arts school together. He had no money. I had the money.
Oh.
And it was very tumultuous. We didn't get along very well. We spent a lot of time together. We lived together. Eventually, he opened a school down the street from me behind my back, luring most of the clients away without ever telling me. So it's a heartbreaking change in my
Did
life.
you have a
But
feeling about that from the beginning, looking
I
back?
was I was so used to being used that I welcome it.
Yeah.
That's really the truth of it. At
Yeah.
least I had some value in that. And, I saw how he treated everybody else, but there's always that specialness. You think you're going to be okay.
Hmm.
But that was a devastating moment then. I rebuilt, and then he'd stripped it away from me. And now I was on my own. But the good thing is that, Shelley entered my life at that point again. And this is right around where my dad's starting to pass, and I'm taking care of him. So I've got this really, I'm trying to get through the gym, and I'm taking care of my father. I'm drinking too much. I'm going through these things, and I'm starting to coalesce as the adult I am now. And I'm fighting. I'm just not giving up. I'm just taking another step. I'm trying a little bit more. One of my great guilts is that when my father passed, I had been out the night before because I just couldn't take it. And
Hmm.
I went out drinking, and then my mom called me and she said, "I think your dad's gone," because I lived right next door in an apartments community. I came over and he was passed. So I always feel rather guilty about not being present um, for those sort of things. But it was really a transformation, to suffer the loss of a parent, to suffer the loss of athleticism, to go into business with somebody you're not well suited to, and we both have to dissolve it. So it kind of opened me up, and thankfully, I had gotten serious enough in my life to recognize, despite all my promiscuity at that point, because that's part of survivors. I couldn't form a relationship with anybody.
Hmm.
If I met
You
somebody,
didn't have any kind of good
yeah,
example for it.
I was good at the beginning, I was good at the end, but I had nothing in the middle, and I would sabotage it and
Mm.
apologize. I know I hurt some people in my life by doing that. I just didn't there was no way I could be healthy enough to be present for a relationship.
Yeah.
But Shelley entered my life, and she was if you've met Shelley, she is an optimist, and she glows with an inner joy. And when I went
Yeah.
to marrying girl out, there's two type of women in the world, those you date and those that you marry. And I'd never dated anybody serious in that way. And when I asked her out, I knew the gravity of it. Um, and she had known me since I was 17. So that's not a great thing. She'd watch
Wow.
me date. Yeah, she'd watch me date. So, I took a little convincing to get her to go out with me, and she was in a pretty bad relationship. So That was the first time I did something adult-like. I guess I'm 32, 33 when that happens, somewhere in that range. And some of these timelines are starting to mix together, but it's okay. And then I started moving ahead. A friend of mine had closed his martial arts business, opened it to me, said, "Hey, why don't you come in and teach?" I'm not healthy enough to do it. So I started teaching again because I was having real problems when I wasn't teaching. I was working a bar as an extra job. I've been in law enforcement, which I don't talk much about because there's not much to say. It just wasn't for me. I spent some time in it. I did the best I could, but it didn't work out very well for me. But I was working extra jobs at bars until 4 or 5 in the morning, around a culture of alcoholism and drinking. And so I had to kind of grow up to be with Shelly, and it caused some real problems in our relationship. Some of them as being a victim. And she was the first person I told my story to that didn't just shut down or throw me out, and she listened. And as we had relationship problems, she did the one thing that I really needed. She reached out and got me help, and she found a counselor that could help me. And we went together and we worked through it, and she was brave and she was honorable. And I know I hurt her, and I know it was a hard thing to go through. And people ask me why I am so committed to her. I've never met a person like her. I've never met somebody better and pure of soul, who loves so deeply that would take a flawed human being like myself, and despite all my flaws, stay with me and help me grow and help me become a better person. I am indebted forever for that. When she goes, half of me will go, and then we'll find the next adventure together. But it's funny. I talk about all the hard stuff, and I can get through that. But this is what matters. And she made the difference in my life, and she showed me a better path. And she found a way, and she found one of the best people as a counselor. And I had to do the hard work. I got to tell you, I didn't like it. I found out that I'm just a massive scar tissue that has the same habits that every other victim in the world has. I like loud music. I like going to the beach. I have migraines. These are all things that we all go through to distract ourselves. I wasn't an alcoholic, but I drank just to release the structure I created. So I started learning in the introspection of myself, and I'd always been very introspective, but I never had to go through it with another person, never had to share it with someone. And that's when my life starts to get better. It was hard. It sucked. It was no fun. But the other choice is just being this massive scar tissue that does the same thing every day for the rest of their life, never gets better. In fact, gets worse, because the one thing about life is no matter how bad it is now, it's not getting easier. As you get older, it doesn't get easier. It gets harder because we have more reserves to deal with it. So that was really, I don't know what led me to it. I was never that interested in a relationship, which makes you wildly attractive to women for some reason. If you can't be bothered by them, then everybody wants to go out and date.
Yeah.
But I never connected. I couldn't connect to somebody because there's this shield and this distance, and people still feel it around me. I can't quite get there. I'm getting better about it. I think this is part of the process, but she was the first one. I said, I'm just going to go for it, and it took a while, but 5 or 6 years before our proposed marriage, and we'd been living together, and we'd gone through jobs, and then, my gym being closed and my partner betraying me, but we worked through it, and we rebuilt everything. And she's my rock. She's a good person, and we all have our flaws, but I've been incredibly blessed to have her in my life.
Yeah, she's definitely one of a kind. I've never met anyone like Shelly Hill ever in my life. And I mean that as a compliment.
And I can't tell her story. I don't know what it'd be from her side, and I'm highlighting and glossing stuff, but just know that, that's it, that I will always love and adore that woman for her reaching out and taking care of that child that was broken inside of me and taking care of me. And we try to do it on a daily basis. And I'm a difficult human being to live with. I am a driven man who's full of deep passions and dark, uncontrolled problems. And she accepts me for who I am. And she understands that when I'm away, I'm not away from her. I just have to do the work. And she understands who I am now. And it's just a marvelous, compassionate nature. And I will give her anything I can give her in my life for that, because I've never had that. I've never had that in friendship. I've never had that in familiar relationships. I think it's a one of a kind moment. And I think she's incredibly special. And if you watch, she reaches out to survivors, of domestic and sexual abuse. I guess that charity makes a lot more sense now. And now we're rescuing police horses. And she is a rescuer. And I think it's because she had a hard way too with her dyslexia, not knowing how to fit in. But she's an optimist. So
What a relief that must feel like to find somebody who finally actually cares and who is interested, not just interested, but invested in helping you. I mean, was that hard to believe at first? Because I know for me, a lot of times I have this problem of thinking what seems too good to be true is, and then being like, yeah, but what's the catch?
mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't trust anybody well, nor easily. And that's horrific. There is a cycle in nature to things, and you will gain friendships and you'll lose friendships, and things will come and go. And it was so hard to let go and to trust and to be. There's a part of me that just wants to believe the whole world is dark, but there's a part of me that wants to believe it's light. And that was a real changing point, is that trust and that feeling. And I've told you that the one thing that plagues me every day when I wake up, maybe not every day, but close enough, nobody cares. That's what the abused child says. Nobody cares. Yeah. And if they do care, it can't be real. And then I say, well, Shelly cares. And then I start making a list of people, that care. You're on that list. You care.
Yeah.
And so now I can't live that anymore, because it's not true. And if she cares, and you care, and they care, it matters. And it helps. It helps tremendously. And, we're not even close to being in the same geographical part of the United States, but we have deep talks,
Yeah.
and we're honest with each other. And I watch you with your guest, how you deeply care, and that you would sit here and listen to this, for an hour and 20 minutes is a deep privilege. And it makes a difference. These small things make a difference. I had one teacher say to me, she said, Brian Hill, I don't know why everybody uses my full name, but apparently they need to get my attention. She said, I don't know what you're going to do in life, but it's going to be special.
Wow.
And she meant it. She meant it. She goes, you don't fit, but you're going to be something special. And I get bumps every time I say it, because she meant it. She looked at me. She saw me. You can change the course of somebody's life by one sentence, by one act. Let them know they're not alone. Let them know that they can move forward.
It's totally true.
Hey, we're almost at the end.
Well, I don't know if that's good or bad. I mean, I have see things come up while you're talking, Brian, and they're really good points, and they're really good questions. And then if they're in my brain for longer than 5 seconds, it's hard to keep them there, because I'm still listening to what you're saying. And then sometimes I write something down and I can't even read my own writing, so I don't even know what it was about. I do have before you move on to the next section, though, the one thing I did write down that was a question of mine is, when you were talking earlier in your story, and you were, I know that it really hurt you what your dad did, but the betrayal and hurt I saw in your eyes when you talked about your mom, when she just blew it off, basically, that hit me really hard, because I don't think you ever get over that, truly. But my question is, what is your advice to people? Because I did not realize how much you know me, Brian. I don't know how
Yeah.
you know me, but you know me, and you've known me this whole time, and I thought that I was hiding it, but you know me, that makes me scared. So, but my question is then, how do you or do you ever get past that kind of betrayal? Um, I don't know how else to phrase it better, but you know that kind of betrayal that just takes a piece of you when it happens? What kind of work have you done to help with that?
I hear the pain. It is. I think for me, I was very angry, and then I had
Mhm.
to take care of her, which is even worse. And then she was really not there, and there was nobody to talk to about it. And then she saw me as her father quite frequently. Um, but what I saw at the end of her life was a scared little girl that lived inside of her. She was an abused, flawed human like I was. And she didn't have whatever gift, blessing, answering a prayer that I had. The education made a big difference. Um, the unwilling to bend, to learn to fight, the clarification of that, the deep philosophies all help. But I see her as that poor little girl. She loved her dad so much, and
Mhm.
he died, and that was her betrayal. And when I asked her, what I did was confront her with the truth of her life. And she said, I can't do that. She didn't say I betray you. She says, I haven't been able to do it on my own terms. I certainly can't do it for you.
Mm.
I am a disassociative human being who's not present for these things. And I have done the best I can.
Mm.
And you know, she couldn't she loved me, but in her own way. And as an adult, God, have I made some bad mistakes. You know, I've hurt some people. Um, I don't think I'm a hero of my story. I think I'm somewhere in between, and I've hurt some people pretty bad, and they've hurt me too. You know, people have hurt me too, but I can't hold on to those cycles because I'm going to perpetuate them, going to pass them on to the people that are important in my life. So part of it was recognizing where she came from. The other part is recognizing the fallibility of all of us. And then the final part, I think, for us to really grow is you got to let go of it. You got to forgive it as much as you can because it'll poison your whole life. And I refuse for my life to be poisoned by that moment. And I struggle with it. Uh, and then I try to set the good example. I find people in need, and I know the person that's been hurt, and I reach my hand out instead of pushing it aside, instead of telling them they're not worthy. And you know, it happens to be through martial arts or shooting. But when their hand is out, I reach out and I grasp it and I pull, and I listen to them and I pay attention to them, and I know what their pain is. It's got to be similar, and the world is full of this hurt, and we won't let evil survive. But those of us that need to help other people, and through helping other people, it's the most selfish of all acts. Because when you help somebody else, you feel good first, and it
Mm.
sets you on this. And when I don't feel like being a good person, this example, this discipline is here for me always. That this is what I believe to be the truth of life, that I can make a difference, and I will not be that small person who wants revenge, that small person who hates, that small person, that small child that had no father or mother. I can be both to me in my age. That small child in me, I shelter and I defend, and I take care of him, and I give him everything that he wants. And when he rallies and says, Mom didn't love me, it's okay. I love you now, and I'll take care of you. And when I see other children suffering through that, I reach out in the same way. Uh, is there any greater cause than to be a servant of children? I don't know. And I'm an
Well, and
odd man
every
because,
human
yeah,
has a child living inside them.
yes,
They do.
yep. And that's the first one. Take care of him or her. I'm
Mhm.
telling you, they're controlling your life and you just don't see it. So the excuses that we make can't exist if we start our self-help process. And self-help always says what? Help yourself. Start getting better. Because a dysfunctional human being is dangerous. And a selfish and a callous human being is dangerous beyond all belief. And a self-interested human being is even more dangerous. And we must...
Especially a smart one.
Yes. And, somebody who understands the motivation of people, And we like to think about the sociopaths and the psychopaths and the serial killers, but the damage being done at a small level is generational, And so in thinking about my mother, it happened to her, and it happened before her, and it happened before her. So my promise was this: it stops with me. And not only does it stop, it gets better. At least I'm going to make some people's lives better. And I haven't always done that, but I've done a lot. I've helped some people. And there are some young men and women running around the world doing good things because I was present for them, even though I'm a mess. That's the other hard part. I'm a mess.
That's so
what
crazy.
Right do I have?
When I hear you say that, it's so crazy.
But what right do I have? What do I know? Well, I know a lot because I suffered and I have the experiences. And so I'm not always right, but at least I have your best interest at heart.
The other thing that you have done through your survival as a child is you have developed an insanely keen sense of observation of human behavior, to the point where I honestly think that and we know this to be a fact, really, that if you hadn't chosen differently each and every day of your life, you would have ended up as a perpetrator, as a predator, very easily. And I sometimes want, just out of pure curiosity, sometimes I want to live inside your head when you're teaching a class and have the Brian Hill computer system goggles on and be like, what is he seeing and observing, and what does that mean? You know what I mean? Just body language, tone of voice, anything that you pick up on. I mean, that could be a class. You should teach that.
Well, I don't think you do. There's so much pain in people. There's so much hurt. And that's one of the reasons I don't let people shake their head no. It's the first step in self-help. The things I see and feel, sometimes I don't want to know. I don't want to watch. I don't want any part of it. I'd like to just kind of wander around and not pay attention.
So you wish
it comes
you
from hypervigilant. Yeah.
Because then you feel like you have a responsibility after that then, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's wonderful. It's turned into something of great importance in my life, but I wish I could just be a normal guy and worry about things, because that's what guys worry about, is how do optics work and how do rifles work. I just don't care about any of that. I care about people, and I'm watching people all the time. But the interesting thing is, inside the pain is this optimism that it's all going to get better. It's what I see with people. The ones that show up for class may not be now. They may not be there for the right reason, but we have so many people coming to class of self-defense that have already been attacked.
Yeah.
They've already suffered. They're there to regain their strength.
Yeah.
And I need to cautiously curate that little ember of spirit and say, you can do this, and you will do this, and we will do it together, and you're not alone. And that's really, to be a coach is to be the advocate, to look for that fan that flame of courage. Let them face just a little tiny fragment of fear. Let them move forward. Let them grow. Suffer with them when you need to. But remind them as the good parent that things will get better. That if you face this, you'll get a bit stronger. Just pay attention. Quit talking. Quit teaching technique. Watch your students. Listen to what they say to you. They will give you the way to fix themselves. People always do.
Yeah,
be invested. Care.
Yeah.
Give a shit. That's what really matters.
Yeah. You could have a new flag that says give a shit.
There's my motto.
With please at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
You know,
Where do we go from here? Is there a chapter 3, phase 3 of this story?
yeah, but this is the hopeful part. I want you to understand that if you do the work, you'll end up in this place where you can make good decisions. I had contracted COVID very early, February of 2020, probably because my fighters came in, had the virus, and they gave me a viral load of it, and apparently really affected men in their 50s, like myself, Paul Sharp, Scott Jelinski. We all really got it bad, and I got it really bad. I was down for 30 days. I had some bleeding behind my eyes. My O2 was in the 80s. My wife had called my doctor, and he said, "Don't bring him to the hospital. We're putting him on ventilators. They're dying. You'll never see him again. Keep him in the basement." And I once again, here I am. I'm facing death, but that's never really scared me. I was seeking my death most of my life, climbing mountains, jumping out of airplanes, MMA. That doesn't really scare me, but I had to make a decision that I had a gym and I had a family, and that family could not function. And I had very little brain power, but we had to really think about it. And then I understand human nature and the cognitive biases. I know that sunk cost fallacy would be a big part of my decision, that since I've already put money into it, I should put more into it. But I recognize that this virus, even though this was before any government shutdown, people just stopped coming to the gym, because who's going to take that home to somebody they love? Everybody's got somebody they have to come encounter. So the gym was empty, except for young fighters who didn't care. They didn't pay the bills. So I had to make a decision. We spent about $10,000 a month. It never made much money. Frankly, I've lived below the poverty line almost my whole life. But I don't need much to survive. I learned that early. So I'm good. I'm a simple man at heart. So I paid my bills, make sure everything works. But I knew I was going to lose money. And I don't know anything about making a vaccine, but I figured it'd be a year at least, if not 18 months before everything came back. So could I lose $180,000 and survive? And I was like, no, I can't, but I love my gym, because I had created Fusion out of all this stuff. And it was the greatest oasis of protection that ever existed for me. It was everything I looked for in my life, where people could come and be themselves and train and be accepted and be protected. And I wasn't going to let anything happen to them in that gym. And I made mistakes, but it was a very good, healthy place. And now I'm dying. And I can't leave that with my wife. So we decided to close the gym. And my landlords, we had a good relationship. Shelley was very good at that. And we asked them, can we get out of our lease? And they said, well, the person next door to us who rented government subsidized daycare said they'll take the spot. So they let us out with a $5, just our deposit. It didn't cost me much money. So I'm out of the gym. It saves me $200,000 in debt. Wonderful. I did apply for aid, and the government really came through and offered me $1,700.
Are you serious?
It was all, if you believe that stuff, good luck. If you're a small businessman, the government doesn't care a bit about you. It never has. But I had to close the gym, and I didn't know if I was going to make it. And Shelley said she shut the door several times, didn't know if I'd be there in the morning. So she took care of me. She never got it. And my dog stayed with me.
Aww.
So he was a good boy, and he kept me alive. I was so stupid. I couldn't even watch Netflix. That's stupid. I couldn't pay attention.
Brain fog? Like you just couldn't.
Yeah. No air. And it was god awful. And I lost friends.
Really?
Their friends, they didn't want to believe that, there could be a virus.
Oh.
So to them, it was like, I hope you get over whatever you have. Like it couldn't be COVID, because you couldn't get a test.
Well, does it matter what it is? I mean, who cares what you call it?
Apparently, politically, it does.
Oh, okay.
And that's where they're at. So I cut them all off. I never speak to them again. At least they told me who they were in that moment. But it's really an odd time. And it took me a long time to recover my health. But then I'm unemployed. I don't have a business anymore. I'm unemployed. There's no help. And John Correa offered for me to do videos So I started doing videos, which creates a new career for me. I had
Yeah.
started an apprenticeship with a shooting instructor nearly at that point 5 or 6 years ago. I worked for free. Uh, I learned everything about it as I could. He was a very good instructor. Somehow I didn't keep the relationship good enough. I don't know what happened. He just faded away from me and just didn't talk to me anymore. Those cycles happen. Of course, I was much more aggressive about where I wanted to be in the world. I wanted to go take shooting classes, and I can't do anything a little bit. Apparently, I have to do it full bore.
We
But
need to talk about that later. Let me write that
yeah,
down. Okay.
yeah, I paid my full dues so I thought, well, I can do some shooting, and I'll do these videos, and that was a great idea. And we decided to move from about an hour and a half away from our shooting range to up here, and buying a house in COVID is really difficult. So we decided to have a manufactured house, which means that we lived in our RV for about 18 months, which is tough with two big dogs. Not a lot of
Wow.
space, but we
There
did
is no
well. We
RV big
survived it.
enough.
No. And then the county decided to pursue me with a lawsuit. They shut down the range and said it wasn't zoned correctly and we needed a business license. So this is a year and a half after the last COVID, and I go to a class and I get COVID again, and I'm super sick. So Shelly's got to go to a hearing where all our neighbors show up and lie about us and say horrible
Oh,
things. And the commissioners lie and they want us to make a proposal. We make a proposal, they close the meeting and they say it's just shut down. So we have to get one of the best attorneys in Georgia, and all the people of the firearms industry come out in droves and support us. They've donated money to protect the range. It's a small
wow.
range, but they donated. So we're able to get a good attorney who really didn't take any money for it. He said, I want to help. And
Wow.
we were able to beat the county commission legally, which was wonderful. They entered mediation with us and proposed our own proposal back. So we cut some of it off. And, I get it. There's some noise, but guys, it's not a full-time range. I taught one
Yeah.
weekend a month. So
Yeah.
it's, they just didn't want us here. So
Yeah.
I had pivoted to teaching on the road, and I found that I can go to places and people will show up and take class, which was
Are you
wonderful.
surprised by that?
Yeah, always.
Oh, that's
And
funny.
but that fearful child always goes, oh, they're not going to like me. Why would anybody
Yeah.
come to my class? So
Yeah.
it's a very fearful thing to travel across the country and meet strangers. But I found a great joy in it. And it finished up the cycle of this, that now I teach deliberate coaching in the inner game of shooting so that you can see a little bit of what I see in the world. You can see inside the matrix.
Yeah.
And I
That's
get
what
to
I should have
travel the
said.
country. Yeah.
That's how I should have described it. That's what I meant.
Yep. It's one of my favorite movies for a reason,
It's a
because
good
I think
movie.
it's really there. But most of us are so caught up in what we feel and not what's going on. We don't pay attention, you know.
Mhm.
And I always say I'm not my feelings, because I've learned to do that. I'm not my feelings. It's the
Yeah.
center of you. If you feel deeply, there is your soul, your center, and it doesn't matter whether you're hungry. That'll affect your behavior. Get
Yeah.
angry, all right. But who you really are is who we're trying to develop. And when the character becomes discipline becomes a law of physics where you overcome inertia and you're able to move forward, and then you become something better. And these martial classes allow you a very small sliver of where
Mm.
you can gain some self-mastery. And so
Mhm.
that I understood all these processes, I was able to make great decisions and not have my feelings push me into something that it wasn't. And now we got the range open. Now I'm traveling, so I teach at home occasionally. I've got a wonderful travel business. The people that support us are just wonderful beyond belief, and it has been a wonderful thing. And now my wife has her dream of police ponies in the front yard.
Yeah.
So she gets to take care of that, and life is good. And life
Yeah.
became good because I'm resilient, and resiliency sucks. You can't, you have to experience it. You have to get better, and you have to just lean in and do what you can. As long as you get started, everything will be okay. The real enemy in all this is not doing anything. Like
Yeah,
you
that's
said.
so glad you said
Yeah.
that, because I know we were talking about this. I was talking about this with a friend earlier today, that you can read and read and read all the books and be inspired and know all the things, but action must follow, or it's
Yes.
all for nothing.
We know the brain responds well to actual struggle. It's necessary for human beings. If you think about, God, the way that we used to have to struggle just a mere 100 years ago. Put yourself in 1924 and think about how hard life was. No electricity, no centralized plumbing for a lot of rural people. It's very difficult. It's a tough life. World War One has just ended. Large majority of the labor force is gone. So welcome to equality. Women get to take really crappy jobs and do hard work everywhere they go. It's a very difficult time to survive. And that's only 100 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy to think
we,
about, isn't
but
it?
we need to struggle because the part of our brain grows when we struggle. And as soon as we stop struggling, it shrinks. And this is the part of will that needs to be exercised. And you've got to do hard things because you get rewarded with contentment. If you do easy things, you get rewarded with pleasure. And pleasure does not last. It is fleeting.
And that is
it'll
a
never be
drug,
enough.
though.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So do the hard work. Do the hard work. No, you're not alone. Challenge makes us grow. You need it. And you can be more than you ever thought by just taking action. Just lean into that struggle. What other choice do you have? If you decide to avoid all the things that you've gone through in your life, it becomes a full-time job of avoidance. Whether you decide to drink it into submission, whether you decide to cheat it into submission, whether you decide to lie it into submission, whether you decide to go into politics. No, that's not right. All right. Whatever you decide to do, gain power, you're avoiding the real problem, which is you. Don't avoid it. Lean into it. Get the work done. Do a little bit every day. Know that you're not going to be capable every time, but do the best you can and say good enough.
And don't compare yourselves to everyone else all the time. It does you zero good. I catch myself doing that sometimes, and I realize, why? Why would you do that? But I think that's human nature as well. Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
Yep. Am I a little bit better than I was yesterday? That's all I really care about. And tiny little increments over 365 days really add up to change. Everybody thinks they're going to make a big change. That's the biggest lie ever told. Make a tiny change. Do one push-up. Do one sit-up. Take a little walk. All right. Do 5 minutes of dry practice. All right. Read a book. Do anything that's hard because it's all hard to get started. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
You're doing the right thing when you don't want to.
Yep. We all know. Easy.
Yep.
So what is this? Do you have more on your list, Brian? You can keep going.
Nope. I think it's pretty good. At the end of my life, I had to take care of my mother, and I found the grace to do so. And
you mean the end of her life?
Yeah, into her life.
You said the end of your life. I'm like, wait a second here.
So now I'm by myself. I have my wife. I have a wonderful stepdaughter. I have a couple really cool grandsons, step grandsons. But basically, there's no one left but me. I'm the end of the line. This is it. This is the last male hill that in this generation. I have not caused any more damage. I have actually repaired some of the damage, but it's a generational problem. I have more work to do, and I will do the work. And I'm going to repair all the damage that's been done that I can do on my watch. And I will do my duty. And that's why I teach the way I do. That's where the passion, that's where the rage to master comes from, because that clock's ticking. Nothing's given to me. I don't know what's going to happen in the next minute. I'm grateful we got through 2 hours of this. I don't know what's going to happen. And this has been the most scary thing I've ever done. Nothing even close. Jumping out of planes and fighting, and I don't know, even compares, but just talking about this and recording it. But it's cathartic. I can feel it. I'm going to be utterly exhausted, but now I've learned to be vulnerable, which I never learned in my life. I'm 58, and I'm finally doing it. I let you see who I am. And if you use it against me, good, because I'll know who you are.
I would never do that. Yeah. That must be why you let me do the interview.
That's right. That's right. But people don't know they mean ill intent. There's jealousy. There's insecurity. There's just people that like to pull at you. You don't resonate with them. You're the opposite. And that's good because we need that. Everybody can't agree with me on what I do, and I can't agree with everybody else. So it was always a fear, but you know what? I'm not afraid anymore of that. And I'm not without fear. I enjoy the fear still. I feel it. It resonates. It motivates. It is a part of my life, but it has no power over me. And I can do the things I need to do. And so can you. you can get up and do the work that you need to do. You're not going to do it because I say so, but some of you need friction. You need challenge. You need to get after it and become a better version of yourself because time's running out. Memento mori. Death comes for us all. Do the work you can now. And when I leave, the only legacy that I'm leaving is I hope some people say, hey, that made a difference. You can write books. You can build statues. You can put buildings up, but they're going to tear them down eventually. But if you create better human beings and they don't screw up the next generation and they don't screw up the next generation, that's how we fix the world. And you do it one human being at a time. And it always will be that way. It will be people closest to you first. You can worry about the world. You can worry about your nation. You can worry about your state and your city. But you got to fix whoever's closest. And if the closest person to you is you, you better get after yourself and fix it so you quit screwing everything up. All right?
Amen. Yeah.
Learn from it. There's nothing wrong with failing as long as you learn. And boy, did I fail a whole bunch. I failed tremendously. Don't live in shame of the failure. Learn from it. It is useful. It is important. And our brains grow from it. We need challenge and struggle. And it only comes from failure. Don't hesitate to miss the mark. Remember what sin means. It means to miss. It's an archery term. All right. You must learn from it. You must grow. And to wrap up our religious beginnings of this, what a great teacher Jesus was. He went to the people that needed it most. He sat with the sinners. He overturned tradition. He was a moralist. He was a virtuous. Everything was passionate. And when you ask me, am I a passionate man? I model myself in that thing. I will do the best I can. I will reach out the hand. I'll offer love where I can. It will be fallible, incomplete. I can be tempted. I can be led astray, but I will do the best that I can. And hopefully that leaves some profound ripples in the pool that is humanity. And if it changes just a couple lives, and I got some good kids out there that I grew up in my martial arts school, and they call me and they say, hey, man, coach, you really made a difference. And I can't tell you how that touches me, And sometimes it's people I don't remember very well. Sometimes it's incredibly, but I've had young men and women that said they couldn't learn and that they had social anxiety and they were incompetent and they were unathletic. None of that's true. The only difference is people who will do the work and people who won't. And you must start doing the work.
And also, you never know who's watching, Brian Hill, right? You never know who's watching you. It could be a stranger on the street, someone in a parking lot at Walmart. And just because of something you say or do can impact them. So you should take that seriously. You always say do the work. What did the work look like for you? You talk about the work, to become who you were in martial arts or as a firearms instructor, but what did the work look like for you to go and unpack all of these things in front of a counselor or whatever? Like, what was the hardest part of it for you? What was the thing that, like, was there something you almost didn't get through, or are you still working on that? Just what does that work look like? I mean,
that's the one thing that counseling was horrifying, because it just kept showing me that, I had all these reactions to all these stresses that is just how human beings react.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
what
there
I
was
wondered,
really
is
nothing
like,
special.
what was the big things that you learned were that you just said it, you're not special. That you just learned that in counseling, that the reactions and the feelings and everything that came up, like that person had probably seen it 100 times before, because that is the reaction that most humans have given those circumstances. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah. We're all the same when it comes to
wasn't that somehow relieving though, in a way, because you're like, oh, well, I am not like broken. I can be fixed. Like this, like I can unpack this or face this, get on the other side of it and grow from it.
I had the opposite reaction.
Like?
Yeah.
Really?
I had the opposite reaction, because then I realized that I'm just a mirror set of reflexes to trauma. And there's nothing really special. And the counseling helped me confront all that, but it doesn't necessarily give you the way to handle it. The counseling is confrontation with the truth.
Right.
And then I see how my father groomed me, and I see how my mom, perpetuated this problem. And then people that go through this, we all have these similar responses, all right, great. Now what do I do?
What do I do
All
with
right.
that?
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and there's offered good stuff, and you have to do it on a daily basis, and you have to move forward. But there's no real clear cut way to get healthy. I just became self actualized. I could see myself for the first time, and I could see this horrific landscape of Mordor that just was in
Yeah.
front of me. There was nothing in it that was special. It was just trauma driven. My love of music, my love of the ocean, it's just trauma driven. It's soothing to my
Yeah.
soul. So then I have to create a whole methodology, and that's where my great interest in neuroscience, psychology, physiology came into play, because I realized, well, we're all reacting the same way to trauma. And
Huh.
I had been reading trauma philosophy because that's what warriors write. And I noticed there was a great difference in some people, how they reacted, but I felt totally naked, that everything that made me who I was really just nothing more than a big old scar. And that was horrifying to me.
Wow. I bet
And
that, yeah.
it took me a while to get over that. I just felt even less. That's why I don't understand why anybody would want to be a victim of anything, because, it just leaves this wretched emptiness. That's what I had to truly confront, is the well of emptiness that was in front of me. And then I had to make a choice of, what do I fill it with? Good things or bad things. And so I started filling it with the goodest things I could. And sometimes I screwed up, but I got better friends.
We all have a
got better
default
family.
mode.
So yeah.
That's one of your things, do the work, right? And I've found from my own experience that is some of the hardest work and most terrifying work.
Yes, you're right.
And you say lean into it, boy, it's a slight lean. It's not a heavy lean, because woo, yeah, that's scary. It's going into the abyss.
Well, if you can charge into it, you're not doing the hard stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's all
you
the
gotta
easy stuff.
tiptoe. Yeah, it's a stress inoculation process to some degree. Yeah.
Yep.
So what are you still working on, Brian?
A lot, actually. So this is it: being vulnerable, being honest, teaching truly who I am, relishing that for its own individual specialness now, not my trauma scars, but being who I am, being a better husband, giving of myself. I give freely of myself, but I'm very selfish in a lot of ways. It's hard to get to know me. What does that mean? Well, it's hard to get to know me. Like, I'll give you everything, but you're not going to know who me.
Yeah. Okay.
So now I'm trying to give that give and take a little bit more. Create friends. Not distrust every overt act of friendship as some manipulation or control. Those are things that I'm really working on. Teaching at a totally different, like the last 2 years, I'm like a new person.
Yeah.
Sometimes I read what I said, or
you're like, did I do that?
I was like, who the hell is that? I know I'm working above my level. I can really feel it. I'm way above my level all of a sudden, and it's scary because I don't know this area. It's always easy to teach what we already know, and then like I went to a class last weekend and I got to be a student, and it was wonderful. And then I got to work my methodologies and listen to somebody else teach, and I don't get that activity very much. And to be present. And then, people, now I go to class and people want to compare themselves to me. Oh, I beat him on the draw. Oh, I didn't miss the shot that he missed. Oh, I did this. And, I don't make a lot of mistakes in the first place, but I can always feel that draw and a comparison. And, if I make any mistake, they're right on me about it. They want to talk to me about it. And so listen, let me say it to all of you. I make a lot of mistakes, it just doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
So the other thing I'm really, really working on is legacy. Can I help people teach better? I think we waste a lot of time. And I know I can't change the whole industry, but can I help you teach people quicker? Because I think shooting's fairly easy. It's the learning about ourselves that is most difficult. So how can I do a better job? How can I get this across to people? That's why I came up with deliberate coaching and inner game, which people don't understand yet, but they're going to get there,
Yeah.
And I think I'll probably be better regarded once I'm gone. You know what I mean?
You
I think
think?
I'm a little
I don't
I think
know.
I'm a little ahead of my time on some things. It's hard
Yeah.
institutionally,
Yeah.
but I want the legacy is, as I said, of health and wellness and learning, and the idea that you can master whatever you want if you're willing to do it. There's no talent, there's no gift. Jesus, what gifts did I get? Did I have an easy road? I'm not an athlete. Uh, I have a decent
You are
brain,
the
I
most
guess.
stubborn person I've ever met.
There is that.
Yeah.
There is that. But there were times of quitting. I gave up.
Yeah.
Totally gave up. I dove into a bottle. I dove into, self-humiliation,
You've tried it all.
self-deprecation.
That is one thing
Shit.
I'll say.
Yep. None of it works.
I think that's all that I have on my questions. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with before we go? Because I almost started crying about a couple minutes ago because I realized someday you're not going to be here. I'm not going to be here. That this will be here.
It's profound. This is forever.
Yeah, what we just did was document your story. And the good that can do. I don't even know how to quantify that. We don't know. We'll never know. But that's pretty powerful when you think of it in that way, because it really hits you. And
somebody in the sound of our voices and our pixels is going to relate to this in a way that is truly personal. And you're the one I'm talking to. And that's what my counselor said. If you can help one person, is it worthwhile to you? And this has been painful, and it's been raw. And I've thought about it for a month, and I've relived it, and I've exercised it. And it went a little differently than I thought it would. But you can be fearless. And it doesn't mean you're without fear, but it means you can do what you need to do, and you can move forward. And I'm going to say something I don't say very often in the world, but if you can work on what's going on with you, I'm here to reach out my hand, and I will offer you love in return, because I know what you're going through. And it requires love to get over it. Love is the greatest power in the universe. It is pure optimism in the face of utter horror that I faced. I love my life. I love what I do. I love the people that I work with. And I love the challenges that are set ahead of me. So embrace that. It is oddly the most selfish behavior in the world, because you're the first one rewarded. You feel better. So I'm offering this with love and hope. And I hope it can reach whoever needs it. And if it's too much, I understand. If it doesn't resonate with you, I get it. And if it does, if I can help you in some way, let me know. And I appreciate the opportunity you've afforded me. This has been a profound moment. Would make this list of 58 years of things that I did. This is a big deal to me, and I think to you too. And I appreciate it. I wouldn't have thought of it. This was your idea. And
and you said yes. So I was speechless when you said yes. I did not expect. I expected you to say, "Let me think about it for a while and get back to you." So I was completely dumbfounded and didn't know where to go after that when you said yes. And
I regret the no's more than the yeses in my life.
Yeah.
And the no's, especially the things that matter, and I've said no to. I've learned to just start saying yes to every challenge, to everything. I'm always ready. I teach this in preparatory cueing. Always be ready, because you're up to it. And that's when you said it. I said, I'm up to it. I can do it. And the child inside me said, oh, hell no, you're not. You can't do this. This is scary as hell.
Yeah.
I don't, and it still is scary, but good. We did the work. I don't think I'll ever do anything like this again. Not because it was so hard, but I think it's special in this moment, you know. And if it reaches nobody, know you've helped me tremendously just by sitting and listening to
I don't even know what to
life.
say to that, because I was going to say the same thing to you. I mean, you're one of the first people that I feel like, without saying a word, you just saw me. And I've never been able to put my finger on it. Still to this day, I never will. I mean, I never will, and that's okay. But on a gun range of all places, and then showed me myself through shooting a gun. I mean, you can't understand that unless you've gone through it, and that's why. Even if I try to use words to describe Brian Hill to people or the classes, I just can't do it very well because it pales in comparison. You know, and Adam's done that for me too. Both of you have been such a blessing to me. And for me to be in this moment right now, you know, 2 years after I'd ever heard of this guy named Brian Hill on a podcast somewhere, is the most profound thing ever to happen. And I've known from day one, since I've heard your voice and heard little tidbits of you, the way that you speak, that there's always been a story there that needs to be heard. I've always felt that from day one. And I've never had the courage until now to ask you. So thank you.
Thanks for being brave for both of us.
I don't feel very brave right now.
That's the way bravery feels.
Yeah,
it's shaky, it's scary, and you can't believe you did what you did.
Yeah.
It's not like the movies.